future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
She's passionate about telling stories of amazing women who are rocking the world and empowering women to live, love, and thrive. Here's your host, Katherine Gray.
Welcome to Live, Love, Thrive, Women's Empowerment Hour, brought to you by 360karma.com. I'm excited. I have two brilliant women on today. First, we're going to talk with Mindy Freedman. She's the founder of the SAM Initiative, which basically helps women collectively give to help empower philanthropic projects. And then later in the show, we're going to have Michele Basso. She is a UCLA scientist, professor, and speaker. So we'll talk to her a little bit later. First up, please welcome Mindy Freedman. Hi, Mindy.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you bet. You are doing some incredible work, and I can't wait for us to talk about it. You have come up with the concept of the idea that, sure, someone could give, to a nonprofit that they feel, especially emphatic about. But what you're doing is putting together women to give them the power of being able to really make even more of a difference by getting the group together, having them put in their donations to gather. So instead of, say, a person gives a nonprofit $2,500, collectively they can give $50,000 or $100,000 and really make a big impact.
Yes.
So I think that is so cool, and we're going to talk about how and where you got the idea to do this.
Okay.
But first of all, I know. Tell us, a little bit about your background.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, your description of a giving circle was really well done. My whole background, I actually have always been interested in helping others, and came up. I had a very strong interest in entrepreneurial and businesses, but really when I went to school for international affairs and Spanish, and I kind of learned about what was going on in the world, and then I went back to school for a degree in international public administration and Spanish.
Was this in Colorado or?
Yeah, and then I went up to Northern California for a master's in public administration and Spanish. And that is the moment that I learned about micro-lending.
Right.
Which is basically was this idea of helping somebody help themselves, help them with a small loan so that they could start a micro business.
I always like that analogy of rather than give someone a fish, teaching them to fish.
It's
right.
Maimonides, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was that idea, and it kind of bridged for me my entrepreneurial background with this idea of helping somebody. It made sense to me.
Right.
And so
I love that. I love that combination.
Yeah. So this was 20-something years ago in the early 90s, and I did my thesis work in rural Honduras. And basically, I was there to evaluate the impact of microlending loans on women. Really poor women.
Now, you just went to Honduras and started doing this? No. So you did this through what program?
Well, this was through my university had set it up with a local nonprofit in Honduras, and working with women that literally lived on mile marker 3, mile marker 4, women with, a $50 loan.
And where did you stay when you worked there? Like, what was that like?
I stayed at one of the local promoters, one of the women that worked for the nonprofit. She housed me, and I had a cold shower. And
was that like a mind-blowing experience?
Yeah.
I mean, life-changing.
Yeah. I mean, I lived abroad in college for a year in Spain, and so I had some, but to live in a developing country
that really
was quite.
seemed
And I from then I went and actually lived in El Salvador for a while. I lived in Nicaragua, Peru was my longest assignment through the U.S. Agency for International Development.
Oh my gosh.
All with microlending. But the idea was this idea of helping somebody help themselves. And I just was, when I saw what a $50 loan could do for a woman so that she could raise pigs and then sell the pigs in the market, I was just blown away. And this was a while ago, and I had come back all excited, and I thought, I'm ready not to travel anymore and work abroad, and I want to see what's happening in my town in Los Angeles, where I'm born and raised. And I came back and I looked around, and I didn't see that kind of model here.
Right. That is surprising.
I saw a more traditional model of helping people with immediate needs.
Or also in the U.S., I've always felt like they only lend money to people that don't need it.
Yeah.
So here you're talking microlending is actually lending money to people that do need it.
Right.
But we're just starting to see that here in the U.S. 20 years later, right?
It is. It's just starting. And the model hasn't changed much from when it was first created in the 1970s by Muhammad Yunus.
Oh, that's who created it?
Yeah.
Oh, who's that?
Yeah, he was this brilliant model where it was this giving these micro loans, but using each other as collateral. So a group of women, and women, as you know, in many, many countries they have the productive role, the reproductive role, and the economic role, and in the family. So
same as here.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So they would, the model is basically, it's just really beautiful because you get some of your friends or your family, and it's if each person gets the loan.
Yeah.
And if you don't repay your loan, no one else gets another loan. So you use each other as collateral. The model it has different variations depending on which countries, but it seems to work really well when you have a homogeneous, where at least
It almost sounds like the beginnings of crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Actually,
that's a good point.
Kind of an offshoot of that.
Yeah, and it was done informally.
Yeah.
In a lot of Latin American countries would do it, they called it juntas, where they would just all combine, they'd all put in $100 and they'd give $1,000 to one woman.
Wow. Now, where was this started? What
country?
This,
the official it was started in Bangladesh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, in the 1970s. But when I came back to the United States, excited about, not just about lending, but the idea of helping somebody help themselves and empowerment.
You wrote a thesis on this,
Yeah.
right? And what I found interesting was that, people might hear this and think, well, giving money to people that don't have it but need it, is that a successful business model? And I know you did a paper on this to find out, well, is this successful? And you come to find out, and I know it's known in research, a lot of research, that the majority of the time the loans are repaid.
Yeah, they have a successful, a success rate of 99.9. The two that are happening right now in Los Angeles are at 99.9% repayment.
Well, I hope they can improve that. No, just kidding.
But the amount of women, I mean, they're mostly Latino women in this city that are doing it. But what's really beautiful about the model, and I don't, it's not all about this model, but what's so beautiful about this model is that eventually the women not only have savings, they can employ their families, and become bankable. And so there's a lot of relationships being forged with the formal banking system. So now what they used to be part of the informal market, they're now moving over into the formal market, into the formal.
Wait a minute. You mean banks are doing like this
So
microlending?
they'll help these women now open up an account where they would do all their business transactions through a 7-Eleven. And now they're actually have a savings account in Wells Fargo. And so this particular model, which is here in LA, the Grameen Bank, but they are forging relationships with local banks too.
That's really
Yeah.
cool.
So it's exciting for me, though, after all these years to see it finally emerging here in Los Angeles.
And you're really doing two really great things. So we're going to talk about both of them.
Yeah.
So this one that we're talking about, you've said, is called social enterprise.
Yeah.
So social enterprise is this microlending that you saw 20 years ago in your travels and work in Honduras and other evolving countries. that you saw it as a model that worked, and your paper and research showed that this is a workable formula.
Well, and also
Yeah.
a lot of my research was that there is a qualitative empowerment that it was measuring the empowerment of these kinds of loans on people's lives. And that was what is the hardest thing to show a donor sometimes, because you can
Yes.
say there's a 99% repayment on a loan,
Right.
but to say that you've actually changed someone's life is a little bit of a harder.
Right.
So the indicators of empowerment were testing those indicators was really my emphasis. But
And most of these were for women, right?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right,
exactly.
which is just that underserved market. So it's really cool that this microlending focus has really been on women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
Even
because
back
they're
then.
so committed to their families.
Right.
Yeah. And social enterprise is not just microlending, it's also all these nonprofits that are emerging in our own city.
Right.
That are looking at income generating. There's some really great examples of organizations that are looking at income generating activities to help with their sustainability as an organization and
Now, I know one of-
ultimately empower the people they serve.
Now, I know one of the ones that you mentioned was LA Kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is LA Kitchen one of the ones that your groups have given to?
Yeah. So last year we started SAM, which is the SAM initiative, is SAM SE, Social Enterprise, and it was our first year collaborating funds for that effort. And LA Kitchen was our first recipient, and they're an incredible model. And they take, just to hear Robert Egger speak, I'm pale in comparison, but he so beautifully describes how he takes people who are very at risk of not being able to get a job,
Like-
people coming out of the foster care system, out of prison, taking food that would otherwise be thrown away, teaching them how to prepare healthy meals, and then securing contracts for senior population. So touching so many things, and the income coming in off of that actually going back into the organization.
Right.
And that's just another example of social enterprise. But when we began the SAM initiative 4 years ago, this will going into our fifth giving cycle, the idea was to address and bring philanthropy to be an inspiration and sort of a catalyst, not only to give, but to help people who want to give what's going on in this city and where we can have the most meaningful impact. And so it could be immediate needs. And this year so we're running the 2 giving circles, but in the original one, this year we're focusing on homelessness.
So what I want to explain to people is what the SAM initiative is.
Yeah. So
You decided that women sometimes lack a little bit in their philanthropy. They don't, first comes family and whatever other priorities they have. But you want to give women the power of being a part of making a difference.
Yeah.
And your vision was that instead of just giving their one donation, $100 or $500
your
or
charitable dollars.
$2,500, was to get a group of women together that want to make a difference, and then you select different nonprofits for them to review, and then they collectively decide which one or two they're going to give their collective money to.
Yeah.
And then collectively they have $50,000 to $100,000 collected to empower a philanthropic project.
Exactly.
So,
And the whole process of that from beginning to end. So you're getting the women, the members of the Giving Circle involved in the process, not only through nominations, but also choosing the genre. Is it this year's homelessness? But then of those, so we start with a fast pitch, and we look at let's say 6 or so, and then we vote how many will go forward. We do a grant proposal, so the women review the proposals and their budgets, and so it's a higher level of involvement than just writing the check.
Right.
And those that want to go on a site visit will even do a site visit. And then we follow up with the organization on questions on, okay, so you're looking for a grant of $50,000 for this. So, for example, we funded a playground for kids with somewhere on the spectrum of autism. It's called the Early Childhood Partial Hospitalization Program at UCLA. And they needed $60,000 specifically to build this really cutting-edge playground that would address kids in early intervention from ages 2 to 5. And it's a hard thing to get funded, even at UCLA.
Right.
So they wrote to us. We went, we looked at the space, and it looked like a prison yard.
Oh my gosh.
It was amazing. Nothing was on that space. And these kids were playing red light, green light in the hallways. They didn't have an outdoor space. And so we looked at their proposal, we looked at the bids that they got for it, we got behind it, and then as a result, other donors then came into it too, so it was able to leverage even bigger.
Wow.
And now they have a state-of-the-art playground that has elevated their status in helping this group of kids people come now all over to look at this, at what they're doing.
You know, what I love about what you're doing that I think is so brilliant is that most people, they say, okay, well, I want to give to whatever, the Cancer Society or whatever. They write a check, they send it in. They never see or know how that impacted anything, really, not tangibly, But what I love about what you're doing is, first, the women get together and have that camaraderie of talking about the different options they have. They get to do the site visit and really see and feel what's going on there, who's running it, what it's about.
Yeah.
Then they get to decide which one they're getting behind.
Yeah.
And then they actually get to see where their dollars go and go back and see that they actually made a difference and that they made even more of a difference as a group than they could as a single
and
donation.
I would say that truly is the magic of what we do.
Yeah.
I always say we have a dual mission. One is to have a meaningful impact in the community, but the other is to inspire women to give and to feel a sense of ownership and pride.
Right.
And these women, when they come and present, in fact, next week we'll be presenting our 4 finalists of who will get our funding.
Oh, cool.
And to be in the room and the ownership that the women take, they really do. They work hard, and there's tears and there's excitement, and of course there's some disappointment as well. But that's the pride that they feel. I always say that our investment, we don't get paid back in dollars, we get paid back in pride, because they really do have a sense of pride that we did that. We did that as a group. And some, I do have to say, I have some members that I've never met. Yeah. They just love the idea of collaborative giving, knowing that their dollars will go farther.
Yeah.
And then there's some women that are very active. And I love the women. I do it because I love the women that have emerged in my constellation of friends, in constellation here. Yeah. Some of these women I never knew, and to see them emerge in leadership and on the board and taking an interest. In fact, many of them now serve on boards of some of the organizations we've vetted.
Wow, that's really cool.
So even if an organization doesn't get the grant, oftentimes those who are on the due diligence committee will be on their board or do something. I have one of our members had a concert, piano. Her husband is a concert pianist, and they just had a concert with friends and family, and they raised $10,000 and gave it to one of the organizations that didn't get a grant from us, but they just fell in love with them. And so we do a great job of pooling charitable dollars and vetting. And that's really what I see my mission as, is to inspire women to give, educate them about what's happening in our community. And homelessness, actually, this year was a great subject for us to look at. One. But we're looking at kids ages 12 to 24, and adolescent, LGBT, and that population. So the women are getting quite an education right now in what's happening with that population and how it impacts how it plays out in the homeless situation. So,
well, you are definitely doing your calling.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love what I do.
And you're really making such a difference.
Thank you.
Not only to the organizations, but to the women that are participating. Yeah. And just so the audience is clear, they can become part of this.
Yes.
If women want to be part of the giving circles, they would go to saminitiative.org.
Yes.
And they can find out about it and become a participant.
And on Facebook, too.
On Facebook, of course.
Yes.
And then the other is that you're doing giving circles now. The new part is for the social enterprise.
Yeah, which is really an exciting thing happening in this city.
And let's explain to everybody, you know, most nonprofits are 3 to 12 months from being out of business because they rely strictly
Yes.
on charitable giving. But what social enterprise does is it makes it a business that the nonprofit can sustain itself.
At least the training part, at least
Yeah.
some aspect of it that is
Some
empowering
aspect
the
of it.
individuals that they serve.
Right.
So that is what I am seeing as it is a trend that's happening. It's emerging.
Yeah.
There's more and more interest in it. There's a lot of different examples. Chrysalis is one of the oldest examples in the city. And it's very exciting. And what I see as our job at the Salmon Initiative is to bring education of this to donors so that they can see firsthand that this is investing your philanthropic dollars to really make a difference, to really change societal needs. Where it's not as a traditional approach of meeting immediate needs, but you're investing in an individual, in empowerment, and investing in sustainability.
Right. And the social enterprise is like a business. It gives people jobs. It generates money. The money goes back into the nonprofit
Yes.
and helps build it along with the charitable donations.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, what a cool process. And it's so interesting that here you were working in that arena 20 years ago.
I know.
And then it's come
I-
full circle
I know.
that it's now coming about in the U.S. Thank goodness.
I know. And it finally, people are seeing that there's a different way to give, you know, and not only to give, but we have some amazing people on the ground that are coming up with these fantastic ideas like LA Kitchen and Piece
That's
by
what happens
Piece.
when you get a lot of smart women together.
Yes,
you know.
yeah.
Put
And I
those
just
brains
on
together.
the note of women, I just want to say that I couldn't do any of this without the women and the members in our giving circle and the SAM Initiative who donate not only their dollars and their time, but we are doing this collaboratively, and that I really believe is the key. Is the collaboration of us.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's what you're all about.
Yeah.
Is
yeah.
you bring people together to make wonderful things happen for those that need it. So more power to you. You're doing a wonderful job. Keep doing the great work. And thank you for being on today. I hope people go to the SAM Initiative. And we will be right back with Michele Basso. Thank you so much, Mindy.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine.
The Live, Love, Thrive radio show is produced by 360karma.com. Are you a 360 Karma woman? If so, spread the word. Be sure to follow us on social media at 360 Karma Women on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please like us and share us with family and friends. This is the year of the woman, and we are stronger together. The Live, Love, Thrive program is brought to you in part by Honda of downtown Los Angeles, supporting the equality and empowerment of women.
And we are back with Michele Basso. Hi, Michele.
Hi,
How are
Catherine.
you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I heard that ever since you joined UCLA staff, it's never been the same.
Very true. Yes.
I'm just making that up, but I can only imagine. They can't have enough bright women.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
So I know you are a scientist, which I just love because I haven't had a scientist on my show yet. And you're a professor of psychiatry and neuroscience.
Neurobiology. Yeah.
Neurobiology. And also a speaker. So I'm so happy to have you on today.
Thank you so much.
You know, I want to talk about what led you to do what you do, because it's always fascinating, you know, like how does someone get into neuroscience or be a professor of psychology and neurobiology?
Yeah.
Hey, I got that right.
Yeah, right. You're good.
So, you know, what was the path to that? I know you told me you grew up with your dad working at IBM.
Yep.
And tell me a little bit about how that kind of shaped your future.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I was very much influenced by my father's interest in hardware. At the time, it was the early '70s, I guess, and he was a hardware engineer for IBM.
Yeah.
And he just liked gadgets. You know, he liked transistor radios. He was always taking them apart, putting them together, attempting to put them back together. And I just loved that. You know, I loved toying around with those things. So I've always had that sort of, I guess, inquisitiveness about how stuff works.
Right.
And so that was probably the genesis of that interest.
Right. Everybody wants to walk in mom or dad's shoes,
exactly.
especially when they're a kid.
Right.
And so he used to take you to work with him.
He did.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. Yeah. He called IBM itty bitty machines. You know, back then.
Because they were so gargantuan.
So big. Yeah, exactly. You saw Hidden Figures, I guess, at the movie. Yeah.
So you and your dad were very tight. And then I know you shared a very intimate story with me that you lost your dad at 10 years old to suicide.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine how traumatic that is for a child, right?
Yeah.
But I think the good thing that came out of it is that, as most tragedies do, I wouldn't be surprised. I was thinking about this, that I would think that your interest in neuroscience might be related to wondering what would make someone think the way they think to have a suicidal situation. And I would think as a kid that would plant in me very early to think, I'd like to study and know more about that. Do you think there's a correlation?
It's a great point. If there is, it was entirely unconscious.
Right, totally unconscious. I think as many things are.
For sure, yeah.
But I was just thinking about, interesting that you went into neuroscience.
Yeah, right. Why don't I study breast cancer, for example, right?
Right,
Yeah, exactly.
You know, as a scientist, researcher.
Don't have experience with that. That doesn't run in my family, so it's probably true. It's probably very true.
I think because when our parents have various things, like my parents had cancer, and I think we do tend to want to put a focus on, what's the solution to that? How could we ever do research to find how to prevent these things?
Exactly, yeah.
Right? So I was just thinking how that would seem like a normal thing for you to gravitate to.
Quite possibly.
And then I know, oddly enough, here you are researching about in the labs at UCLA about things like how people with Parkinson's, how they, manifest different things that you're studying. And so the odd coincidence is that your brother ended up with something similar. You have to remind me the name of it.
So my research focus is on Parkinson's disease, how the brain controls how we move, and how it goes bad in diseases.
Right.
And there's another disease that involves the same region of the brain that goes bad in Parkinson's disease. It's much rarer than Parkinson's disease, and it's called dystonia. It's a disorder of movement that is characterized by sustained muscle contractions. So patients often have very contorted postures because different muscle groups are active at the same time, and they're active like spasms.
Right.
And so, just recently we learned that my brother, in fact, has what's called segmental dystonia. So it affects his neck and his torso. And it's a very rare disease, but it's been quite debilitating for him.
So the work that you're doing, the research, could help people with that or Parkinson's.
That's
the
our
goal.
Hope. Yeah.
Right.
That's our hope.
So what kind of studies do you do to test these things that would help these people? So let's say if our listeners know someone that has this type of thing, what type of research are you guys doing to try to help people?
Sure. Yeah, so I think this is an important point, and one that I'd like to emphasize to your listeners, that often the way science works is in very slow steps. So the kinds of experiments that we do in the laboratory right now there may not be an obvious translation to a patient in the clinic.
Right.
But the knowledge base that we're developing, that we're learning, we hope one day will lead to some perhaps better treatments, and even possibly earlier diagnosis.
Well, what I found fascinating is that you said that sometimes it's research that was done 10 or 20 years ago.
Exactly.
With something you're doing today that creates the collective information that's the epiphany of something that can make a difference.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, like you're saying, it may not be exactly that one thing you're doing in research in the lab at that moment, but using that in conjunction with other findings over the past decades.
Exactly.
For instance, you were telling me about the lazy eye syndrome.
Yes.
If you'd like to explain.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great. So, many years ago now, back in the 60s, early and late 60s, two investigators from Harvard named Hubel and Wiesel were doing very fundamental scientific experiments using animals to try to understand how the brain encodes information about vision, about what we see.
Right.
And they discovered a whole variety of things that were interesting, very interesting.
Yeah.
And actually, ultimately, in 1980, they won the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine for this work.
Wow.
But the interest in the work was just knowledge, fundamental knowledge. What got them out of bed in the morning was trying to understand how it works. How does it happen? How do we see?
Yeah, it is fascinating.
Right? Yeah. So their interest was not in anything translational. It was not anything to help people, but just to gain fundamental knowledge with the hope that one day in the future it will lead to something.
Right.
Well, as it turns out, it did lead to something. So children are not often, but in some cases, born with one eye that sees less well than the other.
Right.
It's a condition called amblyopia, or lazy eye.
Right.
And it turns out that based on the work done by Hubel and Wiesel back in the 60s, the mainstay of treatment for kids with lazy eye was to patch the good eye, right? In an effort to get the bad eye to strengthen it. Exactly.
And they learned that from doing it on animals where they would cover one eye, then cover the other eye.
Exactly.
And then,
essentially deprive one eye from good visual stimulation, and they learned that there was a competition between the two eyes.
That's interesting.
So, in the brain, anyway.
It's kind of like, I guess, our glasses today when we, sometimes they'll give you a little lesser strength to try to strengthen your eye, right?
That's right. A similar idea. Yeah.
But all that research probably lends itself to even understandings like that for opticians or whatever.
Exactly. It was one of those things that they just did because they were interested in knowing how it worked.
Right.
And it turns out 20, 30 years later, it has a clinical relevance. So it's hard to say right now what this thing is going to lead to, but it will lead to something, for sure.
So you all write papers on your findings, and then you travel around the world and speak at various places telling them about your findings?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so is that the way it works, is that everybody's getting up, sharing their findings to see what links there are? Is that the purpose of it?
It depends on the forum. So we have conferences where there are many people presenting their individual work.
Tell me the truth now. Yeah. A conference full of scientists. That's got to be pretty interesting.
So it's very funny. There are.
Is it boring?
At the society. For me, no, but
I'd be glazed over, right?
Yes. It's very funny though. The Society for Neuroscience is a 30,000 plus member meeting is held every year, and often it's held in New Orleans, and it is very funny to see 15,000 or so neuroscientists walking down Bourbon Street.
Would you say 15,000 nerds?
No, yes, that too. Yes, right. It is a sight to see. Yeah.
I bet it's fun.
Yes, it is fun. Yeah.
When you go to those conventions, conferences, what do you learn from that? Like, what kind of you learn about all the different breakthroughs and findings? That would be fascinating.
Absolutely, yeah. That often I take the opportunity to go to symposia and talks that are outside of my immediate field in the hope that I could learn something new. You know, that's the other thing that I enjoy about those conferences. And also, in truth, it's a networking opportunity. And I think this is something particularly important for women who may struggle with that extroversion a little bit. But it's a great opportunity to network with.
Where did you study your undergrad and your PhD and all that?
Yeah, sure. I did my undergraduate degree at Fairfield University in Connecticut, which is where I grew up.
Right.
And then I did my master's and PhD degree at Stony Brook University in Long Island, which was not too far from my home, where I grew up. And then after that, I went to Washington, D.C., or Bethesda, Maryland, actually, and I did a postdoctoral fellowship for about 5.5 years at the National Institutes of Health.
Wow.
That
so must have been
there.
amazing.
It was wonderful. It was a very, very formative
Probably
experience.
no training like that.
It was wonderful. Yeah.
Now, they're in danger of funding right now, right?
With the new administration, it's unclear what will happen.
Now, because the work you do depends on grants from them, right?
Critically, yes.
Yeah, which is government grants.
Yes. Yeah.
And so government grants are very instrumental in findings that will help elongate life and make our lives more healthy and just longer, healthier lives.
Exactly.
Because the work you're doing ultimately could lead to helping people find out how to help Alzheimer's, right? Which is like the most prevalent growing disease for baby boomers. So if the government doesn't give the grants for this research, then obviously there's no way we're going to be improving that situation. So listeners need to be cognizant of this as they voice their opinion and their activism about how important it is for the government to fund this research.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes, yeah. It is the lifeblood of innovation and medical advances, and that's correct.
What about things like, are there any inroads? Do you know of any inroads you could share with us about Alzheimer's?
It's not my area of expertise.
Right, but I know that's like such a booming problem.
There's about 11%, I guess, of the population over 65 or so will likely develop Alzheimer's. So it's pretty common.
Wow.
There's a lot of effort on trying to discover a biomarker, and that is essentially a non-invasive way of determining whether someone has Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
And there are various proteins that are involved that accumulate in the brain in different regions of the brain and cause brain cells, known as neurons, to die, and that's essentially what Alzheimer's is.
Right.
And so there's a large effort to develop imaging tools like magnetic resonance imaging, PET scanning, those kinds of imaging tools.
So we can detect it earlier, right?
Yes,
right.
exactly.
That is the issue, isn't it?
Because if
we do
with
detect that
Parkinson's
earlier, then we could help prevent it, at least the rapidness of it.
Yeah, and this is true for all diseases that involve neurodegeneration, like Parkinson's.
Let
and
me ask you
Alzheimer's.
this: as a scientist, do you believe that Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, all these things, do you think they're connected to what we eat or environmental chemicals around us?
So I think both diseases have a genetic component. There's definitely a genetic component, but it's not what we call 100% penetrance. So if your parents have it, you have a 50% chance of getting it. It's not like that. There are some diseases that are like that, cystic fibrosis and other Huntington's disease, for example.
Right.
But Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease are not like that.
Oh.
So it clearly involves other things, not just genetics. And what those other things are, we still don't know.
That's the big question.
That's the $64 million question.
But it
as we
is
say.
possible, yes, that it could be food we're ingesting or chemicals in our environment.
I think there's some evidence for a chemical involvement in Parkinson's disease. There are certain environmental pesticides that have been used in the past that have been associated with higher incidence of Parkinson's disease.
Wow.
I don't believe there's any evidence for that in Alzheimer's disease at this point. There is a large new effort in scientific investigation to look at what's called the microbiome. It's gut and brain interaction. So presumably that will tell us something about things that we eat, things that we ingest.
Right.
But as of now, as far as I know, there's no evidence for that.
Right.
Yeah.
So they have to prove that, but people do. I think, I have friends that have had like multiple sclerosis. I think, I've had Ann Barak on, who healed herself holistically, and I've had other friends heal themselves holistically from various things by eating differently, and other things like, I guess, spiritual practices that eliminate stress.
Absolutely. That's a huge,
I mean, I definitely think stress lends itself to these diseases.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting direction and thing that we should be thinking about,
Right. So I wasn't sure if as a scientist you would advocate for that or not.
I haven't seen the evidence yet, so I tend to believe things that I see data for. If I don't have the data, if the data
But don't you
aren't
think,
there,
though, sometimes people, like, they've changed their eating habit, their routine, their stress.
For sure.
They
that
seem
helps.
to be better or heal. And so you have to kind of look at it and say, well, there must be some correlation.
Yeah, there certainly are anecdotal pieces of evidence for one or two people for whom this has helped. But statistically speaking, it's hard to
measure.
Yeah.
Because the majority still take the traditional path and interesting.
Yeah, right.
So what about, I know you had shared with me you thought maybe your dad had bipolar disorder.
That's what I think, yeah.
So circling back to that, when people have something like that in their family, I would think, they must be afraid, oh, what if I have that? And is that type of thing hereditary?
There is a genetic component to it. Again, it's not, as we say, 100% penetrant, so there's no guarantee that you will have it.
Could you do one of these scans, the PET scan or whatever,
wouldn't
and
that be
find out?
nice? Wouldn't that be nice?
You can't.
But no, you can't.
But can't you
no
do
such.
that? Aren't there some scans they can do to tell you if you're more likely to get like Alzheimer's or something? I've heard
that's
this.
what that was the biomarker idea. That's what people are
right.
working on. To try to develop non-invasive measures to take a picture of your brain and say, look, you have this.
So they say they can do that now. Can they?
For certain aspects of the disease, but and certainly not for psychiatric disease.
Right. But not for bipolar or something like that.
No, those are psychiatric diseases.
Right.
Yeah.
And you and I had this conversation about it. It is a disease. Like when we were talking about your dad's suicide, it wasn't. I had said, it must be difficult because it feels like a choice, and then. You corrected me, and I agree with you that it's not a choice because it's a disease.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's just like diabetes, just like cancer.
Right.
Mental illness is a disease. And that's something that, needless to say, is very near and dear to my heart.
Of course.
The stigma associated with mental illness.
Right.
Many people still believe it is. You can will yourself out of this, depression,
out of a
for
depression.
example.
Cheer up.
These things, these are not
because we don't
willable.
Understand what we don't know or feel.
Correct, yes.
But that goes for anything, being gay or being, whatever. People don't relate to things unless they stand in those shoes.
It affects them personally, yes.
Speaking of that, so your family's always been supportive of you and your wife?
Yes, very much so.
Yes, that's great.
Yes, very much
in this day and age, it's nice to know you have that support. Have you seen that show Rise Up last night?
I did not, no.
It's a great new show that's kind of capturing the moment of what's going on in the world in the past few decades and today, and how there's still a need for activism. And I know you guys got married when? A year ago?
Almost the day after Prop 8 was overturned.
Oh, so
yes.
It will be interesting to see in this administration if they roll that back. I know a lot of my friends in the gay community seem to be concerned about that. But as a married couple, you don't have to worry about that because
I hope not. Yeah.
yeah, because they can't roll back. They'd have to grandfather in people that are married, right?
Yeah.
I would think.
I'm not. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
It's a little
but
scary thought.
I hope
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't occur. Obviously, I did the first film about gay marriage. I can't
Yes,
marry
right,
you, so it's
right.
always been very near and dear to
Beautiful.
my heart
Sure.
that everyone should have the right to love the person they love and to get married. So, and your wife is so lovely. You guys
Thank
are
you.
such an awesome
Yes.
couple.
Thank you.
She too at UCLA.
Yeah,
It's so nice you guys get to work
Yeah,
together,
yeah,
so
we
to
commute,
speak.
We commute in together. It's
Yeah.
very nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's very
different
nice.
departments,
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, yes. Yeah.
So, what's the future for you? What is it that you would like to leave as your legacy, Michele? Because you're doing really important work. What would be your dream goal?
Wow, I don't think I've ever been asked that, and I can't say I've really thought very deeply about that. I suppose I should.
I mean, it would definitely
yeah,
be cool
I mean,
to find the cure
For sure, right.
Parkinson's
For
and other neuroscience
For sure, yeah. It's
issues.
unlikely we'll do that.
Yeah.
I guess
Hey, you
I'd
never
like
know.
to- you never
You
know.
never
You
know.
never know. You never
You
know.
could be the
That's
one,
true.
baby.
That's true. Yes, that's
Could
true.
be a Nobel Peace
Possible.
Prize on the horizon. Why not?
Why not? Why not? Yeah, I think I'd like to be remembered, as it were, as having done good, solid work, as
Yeah.
having contributed to the body of knowledge that
Yeah.
leads to what we know about the brain.
Well, it's so nice because what you're doing is making such a difference.
Mm.
I mean, it must feel good to go to work every day and know that you're working towards something really important
Mm-hmm, Yeah.
that's making a difference. It's
Yeah.
not like you're flipping hamburgers. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing wrong
Not
with
that
that.
that's just-
Nothing
that's
wrong
right,
with that
that's
because we
right.
all got to eat. But I'm
Yeah.
just saying, every day you're making a difference.
Yeah.
And isn't it nice that you get to do every day what you love?
It's amazing. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful
Yeah.
and so fortunate.
And as a
I
professor-
recognize that that's a privilege. Yes.
It is.
is, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you also, besides doing the lab research, you train other
Yeah.
students, right? Because you're a professor.
Right. So that's one of the other things that I feel good about. As I get older, this
Yeah.
is more present for me. It's my role as a role model for young girls who
Yeah.
are particularly who
Right.
are interested in pursuing careers in science.
What's the
because
percentage of women
Very
in science?
few.
Very few.
Yeah, very few. And
Yeah.
the sad part
You're
is
not the
that
only one, are you? No.
I can still go to meetings and,
And
be the only woman
one?
in the room.
Oh
yes,
my gosh!
yeah, which is
I say that
horrifying to
every
me.
week.
Yeah.
Every single industry, we
Yeah.
need more women at the
Yeah.
decision making
Right.
table, in the table of influence. Because
Right.
if look how many women could be in that position,
Exactly,
bringing
yes.
something smart to the table, and they're not having that opportunity.
Right,
How do we
right.
get more women into
Just
science?
bringing a different perspective, right? We know
Yeah.
diversity makes things better, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
that's right.
hope that this interview helps inspire listeners, young listeners,
so,
to
yeah.
say, I would like to be a scientist, and
right.
that it's a real job and it's a really important job, and that anything is doable.
Absolutely.
We've got to start giving young girls in this world. I was going to say in this country, but
Yeah,
in this
but in this-
world, the idea that they can do anything,
Absolutely.
and that would mean even being a scientist.
Exactly.
So you are definitely a great role model
Thank you.
for young women and all of us women. And I love the work you're doing. I so
you very much.
appreciate it. Thank you for sharing it with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And
Yeah.
just keep making an incredible difference.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Catherine.
much.
Thank you.
And we will be back next week, same time, same UBN channel. Thanks for tuning in, and just make it a great week. Hugs and happiness.